Hi everyone, it's Darlene. Welcome to this week's card. It's really good to be back. I've been on vacation. I actually made this card before vacation and I sent it to my husband who is at home working. So anyway, I used this mini front and backs by Art Impressions. It's cute little kitty and dog. And I also used a couple of sentiment stamps by Simon Says Stamp. There are these sketchy banners dies that match the set on the left there. And then also they match up with the striped greetings. So I'm actually going to use a sentiment from the striped greetings. Alright, so I'm going to take my kitty cats and I'm going to stamp the back and the front in Memento Tuxedo Black ink because I'm going to be watercoloring and I want to make sure that it doesn't bleed. And I've got my Peerless watercolors, and I'll have a link in the video description if you're on YouTube or on my blog about how I store these and how to use them. But anyway, I'm going to pull 3 colors, and I actually spray a little bit of water on my craft sheet, and I'm going to use an aqua painter. And I'm going to pull some water, and you kind of have to experiment a little bit when you first get started. As you can see, there's just a little bit too much water coming out at first, so I wiped it off on a tissue, and then I tried to spread it out a little bit. I decided it was just too much, so I just wiped it with a tissue and started over. It's really forgiving. I decided to go ahead and start with the spot at the top, so just a little V of white fur at the top, and I'm just going to fill the rest in on his head, or her head I guess I should say, because this one is me, with the neutral tint. And I just get a little darker as I go because you can always add more color, and once it dries it becomes permanent. So I'm trying not to over watercolor it, and as it dries, the lines where the white fur and the dark fur meet will become much more defined. So once I'm done with the head, I'm going to do the arms here. I'm leave a little bit of white where the paws are. And I'm not going to be too particular about this because it's such a small area, and then this body is actually not even really going to show, so I just need to lay a little bit of color there. Alright, for the next 2 kitties I'm going to make an eye patch, and I'm going to leave a little bit of white around the dark eye, and then just kind of create it's pretty random, my shape here, to make it look like just kind of a natural patch. And then because my aqua painter has such a fine tip on it, I'm able to stripe the watercolor. Now I'm going to let those markings dry while I do the next cat. And as I allow them to dry, they become permanent so that I can take another layer of the gray, a lighter layer, to shade the rest of the cat and not affect the markings. So I'm trying to make each of these cats just a little bit different. Alright, now I'm going to go back in with just a touch of the gray, and this is really just to add a little bit of dimension. But I want it to be really light. And as you can see, when I'm putting water on top of the markings, nothing really happens. And then I added a couple of patches to the paws. Right, now I'm doing the back, and by the way, this is Strathmore watercolor paper. You really need to use watercolor paper for this technique here because it's just very water intensive, and your paper will easily pill up. So you want to make sure you have the watercolor paper which will absorb a lot of water, and you won't have any issues. Anyway, so I started with a light all over color, and then I'm just adding a little bit of shadow on the side. And then I'm going to make some markings on the back of each cat, just a little bit different. I'm going to use the same technique that I used on the face, which is just create the markings first. And they're just sort of random, just some spots here and there. If you use less water, you'll get more color. More water will make it lighter. Now finally, on this last cat, I think I kind of got a little bit carried away with these random spots, and it started to look a little bit like a cow. But considering my husband, when I got home, did not even notice the inside of the card and all the backs of these kitties that I worked so hard on, and when I showed it to him, he's like, "Oh, that's so cool." Anyway, that's just how it goes here. Anyway, okay, so let me finish up these markings, and here's where it starts to look a little bit like a cow. And then same thing as what I did with the face. I went back and added just a little bit light gray just to make it just give it a little bit more dimension. And notice that I kind of go back and forth with getting some water from my craft mat, squeezing some water out of my aqua painter, just to get the right amount of water. So these cats have bows, and I'm going to do one cat with blue, which is Alice Blue, and then the other ones I'll do with this really pretty purple color called Heliotrope. And notice that I color the inside of the bow first because that's when I have the darkest amount of color on my brush. And I left some white areas so that I can take the color off my brush and go back in with a lighter color and fill in the lighter areas. Alright, now I'm actually going to cut out all these pieces, and it does take a little bit of time. Alright, so here's the, I put this in just regular real time. This is the window that's going to have the cats showing through. And I wanted to show you how I did the dry embossing around the edge. So what I'm going to first do is take my Spellbinders Labels die, and I'm going to use this is my sandwich, is just the tab 2, the acrylic plate, my cardstock, the wafer thin die, and then another acrylic plate. This is just the standard way to cut. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to carefully take my sandwich off both acrylic plates, and then I'm going to move to tab 1. I'm going to get that ready in the machine. And now I'm going to take my sandwich and I'm actually going to flip it over very carefully. I'm going to lay it on my platform, and then I'll pull up my acrylic plate. And I'm going to take away the excess paper and just leave the paper that's inside the die. And then I have two other accessories here. They're about $6 each, and they're great for dry embossing. So the first one is just a rubber pad, and I'll have links to these on my blog. And then the next one is called an impressions pad. And I'm just going to put those on top, and I'm going to run it through the Sizzix. And then I'll show you what happens. It's so slow when it's in real time, isn't it? Okay, so when I pop that out, you'll see that there's a really pretty edge. It's just a really nice dry embossed edge. You can see it in just a second here when I get it all figured out. Okay, here we go. So you can see that nice edge. Now I wanted my edge to be a little bit more defined, so I took a C4 gray Copic marker. And when you color on colored cardstock with Copic markers, it really fades. So even though it looks pretty bright right now, it's going to fade into just a very nice background. Okay, now I'm going to cut the center out. I'm going to measure 1/8 of an inch from all sides. And then I'm going to use a paper trimmer, and the first thing I'm going to do is line up on the horizontal lines to make sure it's straight, and then I'll make sure my pencil mark is right in that hole where the blades are running through. And once I have it lined up, then I'll close it and secure it into place, and then I'll take the blade and go up and down to both of my pencil marks on the top and bottom. So I'm not going to cut all the way across because I'm trying to cut this window out. So line it up. Make sure that the pencil mark is right in the center of that hole there. Secure the guide in place, and then run the blade up and down to each pencil mark. So I'm going to fast forward this a little bit, and I'm going to do it on all 4 sides. Alright, now it easily pops out, as you can see. Alright, you know, this trimmer is kind of old, and so the blade isn't very sharp, and so I just took a sanding block to clean up my edge so it's a little bit more crisp. Alright, now I need to cut the hole in the card base. So I'm going to take my window and pencil in the inside, and now I'm going to measure 1/8 of an inch out on all 4 sides, and I'm measuring it twice on each side so that I can join them with a line. And then I'm going to cut it out with that same trimmer again. And this is going to allow me to have a window, or a frame I should say, of gray on the inside and the outside of the card. It's kind of hard to explain, but once I put it on the card, you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. Alright, so same technique, all four sides. Pop it out. I'm just going to erase my pencil marks. And I'm going to be using some multi-matte medium, which is adhesive and it's matte, so when it dries it doesn't have a glossy shine to it, which is kind of nice because if it seeps out the edge you won't see it. So, and the reason why I'm using glue is because it'll be easy to place and get lined up. As you can see now hopefully it makes sense that I've got a gray frame on the inside because I cut it 1/8 of an inch outside the inner frame. Okay, just to add a little bit more finish to the outside of the card, I'm going to draw a line. This is a Copic multi-liner marker and it's 0.3. And the reason why I'm using the Copic liner is because I'm going to color the outside with a Copic marker, and this will make sure that it doesn't bleed. So I'm just going to freehand this, and you don't want it to be totally straight. It'll be a little crooked, but that's okay. And this is a BG10 marker, and I'm just going to color it in up to that black line. And I know it shows through on the inside, but because it's such a light color, you won't even notice it. And again, considering he didn't notice the cats on the inside, I don't think it was a problem. Okay, so now I'm going to start on my sentiment. I'm going to take this sketchy banner, and I'm going to cut some Neenah Solar White cardstock. And this die is solid, so that's why I had to die cut first before I did my stamping. Alright, and this is the banner set, and I'm using Simon Says stamp in sea glass. And then there's a dotted stamp that goes around the outside, and I use black for that. And then I stamped the sentiment, which is from the striped greeting set, the different set, in black also. Now this is going to be a banner that the cats are holding, so I just marked some holes, and I'm going to take a paper piercer. I'm just going to pierce holes where I marked my spots. Make sure they're big enough for some embossing thread, or embroidery thread. I always call it embossing thread. Anyway, I'm going to tie a knot at the bottom of each, and then I'm going to thread it through the holes, and it'll stop where the knot is. I'm going to take some foam adhesive and adhere it to my card front, and now I'm going to work on my cats. So to get my cat to lean over the window, I'm going to show you here how I cut it. So I'm going to cut right around the paw, starting at the edge, and I'm going to curve around until I get to the very top inner edge where the neck of the cat is. And that'll make sure his entire paw goes over the window. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, and it's a little bit more difficult because you're cutting on the right side of the line, so you can't really see where you're cutting, but if you do it slowly, it's not too bad. Now once I have the slits cut, I can then place the cat over the window. And if you kind of push him right on there, it stays pretty well. So I'm going to do that with all 3 cat fronts. And once I get them all arranged, I took a 2A glue pen. I don't think I really needed to do this, but just to make sure they were stable and safe in there, I put a little glue on the inside. Now I'm going to take the banner thread, and I'm going to thread it behind the cats on the side. And then I'm going to take that same multi-matte medium, and I'm going to glue it right to the back of the cat head, right there. I took a little paper piercer to kind of mush it in there. And it's okay, I'm going to be adhering the backs of the kitty cats with this same adhesive, so that'll get smushed together. So I'm using quite a bit, and so it's good because it's matte, so when it seeps out you won't notice. But you do want to get glue all the way to the edge because you don't want it peeling back. So I spent probably a minute or two just kind of squeezing the cats together, making sure that the front and back were secure. And then I just cut off the front of those knots and decided that the cats needed to be standing on something. So I took a C4 marker, Copic marker, and then I blended it out with C1 to kind of get a dark shadow where the cat's standing, and then just kind of a lighter shadow that blends out. And then finally I'm going to put something on the inside. So the outside is You Make a Difference, inside is In Our Lives. Just some Versafine black onyx ink. Now make sure it's behind the cat so you don't see it through the window. You don't want to make that mistake. Now this is love language, or I'm sorry, language of love, love languages, something like that. It's a totally different set, and it had this heart with the dots. I thought it was just so cute, and I thought I'd emphasize the inside with it. This is just Rosebud Memento Luxe Pigment ink. And then just to make my heart pop a little bit, I added some glossy accents to it. And then there's this glitter that Stampin' Up! Makes called Dazzling Diamonds, and I just love the color of this glitter. I don't use glitter a lot because it's kind of messy, but on the glossy accents it really wasn't that bad. I just took a stipple brush afterward to brush away the excess glitter. And that's it. So I know it takes a little bit longer to make this card, but it's just so adorable. I love the front and back, and the dog is just as cute. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next week. Thanks for watching.